right. Jordan, I think you got an open mic, man.
Sorry.
All right. Sam, are you there? All right. So once again, in case he was not aware yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. I had to reload some stuff. Great.
All right. How you doing?
I am doing fine. I had kidney stone surgery earlier this morning, so the anesthetic is still helping me feel very, very mellow right now. But I'm here for you guys.
All right. I don't know. Maybe there's something going around. I don't know, but I also am feeling a little bit mellow here. So
it happens, man. It happens.
All right. So before we do jump in here, everyone, this is Sam Robb, candidate for the Libertarian Party, running for their nomination for president. Obviously, I could say a little bit more, but you probably know yourself a bit better than I do. Would you like to introduce yourself to the people here?
Okay. Yeah, I am. I'm some guy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That is actually kind of interesting to me that as a libertarian candidate, someone who is relatively unknown in the party, I'm doing quite well, and I believe that that's because of the message that I have, which is a very pragmatic, moderate message about reducing the size of government and getting us going in the right direction. Was born in Pittsburgh, grew up here basically in a blue pocket in the red state. So I got to know both Democrats and Republicans fairly well, working class Democrats, backcountry Republicans. Spent some time in the Navy, came back to Pittsburgh and tried to find work as a metallurgical engineer, which is what I was trained for. Couldn't find it, so I decided to be a computer programmer. I've spent the last 20 years or so working to help build startup companies, and then decided last year that the country was not going in the direction that I liked, and if I was going to do something, if something was going to be done, I'd have to step up and do it myself. So here I am.
All right. So before we jump into it, I do remember reading that, and it's a little bit of a personal interest to me. But what was your position in the Navy?
Oh, I was a junior officer, which meant I stood watch a lot and ran a division. I ran first off the replenishment at sea engineering division, which was a deck division on a replenishment oiler, the USS Wabash, and then spent some time as the communication officer. So got to deal with a lot of interesting technology there, and also I was the assistant helo control officer. So I got to do some deck operations with. We had a landing pad for basically supply helicopters and a helicopter detachment on board. So I did some work there with managing that.
Oh, it's a small world. I was a QM3, a nuke drop who got sent to deck department for a little while and then
Uh,
struck rate. So a lot of the same areas. Pretty neat. I had no idea that you were in. You did that. But anyways, just jumping right into it. Most of the questions we have here, of course, current topic are around coronavirus. A lot of people are
oh yeah.
curious. What would you do about coronavirus? How would a Sam Robb Libertarian Party handle it?
Um, I actually had somebody asked that last night and said, okay, if you were president, how would you handle the coronavirus? And my first answer was, if I'm president now, then that means I was elected in 2016. And if I was elected in 2016, one of the things that I would have done, one of the things that I've talked about before and listed in my issues, is reduce the size of government and eliminate regulation. One of the things that we're really dealing with and what we're seeing with coronavirus and the government response is a lot of the positive effects coming out of the government dealing with it are from the government stepping away and getting out of the way. The government saying, okay, you know what, we we don't need to spend 6 months certifying these, recertifying these tests so that we can use them in the United States. When they, when those COVID-19 tests that people have developed in other countries cross the border, they don't suddenly stop working, right? So it's an acknowledgement. Yeah, okay, we can. This regulation is useless in this case. It's really impeding things. Let's get rid of it. So you see them getting rid of regulations about verifying tests, about they're accelerating uh, testing for various vaccine tests and for treatments for the disease. You see them getting out of the way in terms of allowing doctors and nurses to practice across state lines by saying, okay, you know what, if you're licensed to practice medicine in Pennsylvania, then that probably means that if they need you in Ohio, you're not going to kill someone because you crossed the state line. Um, so a lot of the positive responses you see are the government getting out of the way, which is exactly what my administration would have done. We would have looked at these regulations and said, hey, these are ridiculous. And over the years leading up to 2020, we would have eliminated some of these barriers and gotten rid of some of these impediments that are affecting the way we treat disease. Um, Speaking to, what would you have done, what would, suppose you did all that, we have testing, we get to this point, and we're dealing with this situation. I would prefer to see us work to keep those who are in danger safe while keeping the rest of the economy going. That would mean identifying the people that are at risk, making sure that they are quarantined, that they have the services that they need until we can get therapies or treatments for them, get a vaccine for them. Um, Allow the free market. You've got dozens of people working on different types of treatments and vaccine work. Allow them to do what they do. In the meantime, keep the economy going, talk to people, inform them, let them know what's happening and what they can do. And I think we've seen the very positive responses from a lot of organizations. If you look at the various sports organizations, NBA, the baseball leagues, Disney, a lot of churches and religious organizations around the country, all well before the government said, okay, we need to shut everything down, said, we need to stop what we're doing. We need to eliminate these gatherings, not because the government told us to, but because it's the right thing to do because of the information they had. So if the CDC is disseminating the information needed, if the various health organizations and states and counties are giving out the information, we see people doing the right thing in a lot of cases, and we should basically trust people to be responsible, uh, give people the information they need in order to isolate themselves and the services they needed to isolate themselves if they need to, and do our best to come up with therapies and vaccines and treatments for the disease.
Okay, so yeah, I think coronavirus presents a lot of really interesting challenges and questions for the
No doubt.
libertarian
No.
viewpoint. One of the big things that we've seen come up here is in the last few decades, increasingly uh, American products have been manufactured overseas. And one of the shortages we faced is that there's a lot of the medical equipment, particularly masks, which everyone's trying to get their hands on,
Right, right.
are produced in China. And most of the goods coming from China have stopped because, they've got a particularly big issue.
Mhm.
And some people are saying, see, this is why we should support manufacturing here and produce more of our goods here instead of shipping jobs overseas. What is
Right.
your response to that kind of statement?
It's a wake up call for sure. Um, one of the things that was interesting to me, actually, when this was I believe last year when Trump put some tariffs in place for China, specifically with I believe it was heavy duty electrical equipment for power generation industry, and uh, the result of that was after a couple of months that the supplies for that had shifted from Chinese companies to uh, if I remember correctly, companies down in Mexico that were producing similar equipment. Um, so I mean the options are out there. There are plenty of places that we can diversify to, and I think this is a wake up call for companies for the United States in general to say, you know what, it's good. It's a good idea to have multiple input streams when you're dealing with a business. As- Coming from a startup background, when you're a small business, when you are just getting started, a lot of times you will have one significant customer, and you have to, yeah, they're your main source of revenue. They're the first one trying your product, and you have to worry a lot about your relationship with them and keep it solid. And you worry about what happens if they decide to dump you or decide to go to alternate source. So that's one of the things that you do is you try to make sure that you have that you grow, that you have multiple customers, that you have multiple input streams for revenue. This is no different. Companies, the United States, this is a wake up call that we need to diversify. We need to say, okay, yeah, we get a lot of good stuff, a lot of cheap stuff from China, but you know what? There are other places that we can get the same stuff from, and perhaps it's a good idea to start spreading things out, and as companies and as a country, and not rely so much on one particular trade partner.
Okay. So we have a very strong libertarian presence on the server. I'm pretty sure I know what your answers, but I feel obliged to ask, how do you feel particularly about the government trying to facilitate uh, policies that would make sure more production is in either different countries or done domestically?
I think it's a great idea for the government to talk to companies about these sorts of things, to educate them about the possibilities, to to go in and say, hey, here's a real life situation. You could see what happened in the pandemic. Legislating it, forcing it, no, I don't believe that's a good idea. I think what you will see coming out of this is a lot of companies uh, starting to, waking up and saying, you know what, we don't want to be in this situation again, because the honest truth is anything happening in China could put us in this situation again. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be something that spreads. It doesn't have to be a pandemic. It could be internal problems. It could be China simply saying, you know what, hey, we are going to stop trading with the U.S. because we know that hurts them, and we want to get some leverage over them. Um, but I think the answer there is, again, very libertarian position. The government is should be informing, educating, guiding, suggesting, but not forcing companies to do what they need
And
to do.
And why is that? Why are you against government forcing these kinds of policies?
Because, well, I mean, very libertarian viewpoint. You get to make your own choices. As a company, you get to make your own choices. I think the government using force, whenever, just to back up a little bit, whenever somebody says there ought to be a law, what they're saying is, I don't agree with what someone's doing. I want someone to force them, to tell them to do something else. And if they don't do that, then I want you to go. I want you to go, and I want you to arrest them. And if they say that they don't want to be arrested, I'm okay with you shooting them. I'm okay with you killing them. Every law has the threat of force behind it. So if you're talking about companies, it gets a little weird because companies only exist because the government allows them to exist. They're to say, hey, we're going to recognize you as a corporation. We're going to recognize you as they have this idea of a corporate. The corporate as a person, as an individual. That's the way it's going to be treated. I think it's entirely possible for the
Can you hold on a
government to
second,
say, hey,
Sam?
sure.
I don't know if it's on my end, but I think you're cutting out a little bit. Could you go back a little bit? And the last bit I heard clearly it was a part about companies existing because of government.
Right. Okay, so a company exists because they went to the government, they went to the state government and said, hey, we would like to incorporate, right? So we are an organization. We have this legal fiction that the corporation is an individual. That's a right granted by the government. Now, it's entirely possible for the government to say, and I think reasonable for the government to say, if we give you that special privilege, that if there are certain things that you do, we would be willing to revoke that. That's not force. That is simply saying we're going to take away something that we have given to you. So that, I mean, that that's certainly a possibility when you're dealing with corporations. Say, hey, this is a way that we want you to behave, but again, as a libertarian, I think that should
I'm sorry, as a libertarian, that should be what?
be to say, hey, this is what is healthy for you, more healthy for your company. This is what is more healthy for the government. This is what is more healthy for all the country, and make the right decisions. Let people do the right thing. Some people will, some people won't. That's
Um,
I think the overall have people with different structures in their companies, different ideas, different supply chains that we have. We basically have a stronger economy and a stronger country.
all right. So next question we have here is from Breezy. Breezy asks, is the non-aggression principle a real principle or just an excuse to run from a conflict?
Hey, Breezy. Okay, I like this because there's a couple of different interpretations of the non-aggression principle, and there people argue that there are problems with the non-aggression principle. It's a principle. It's an ideal. It's not a rule. It's more it's something that's a strong guide to behavior. Basically, it says don't initiate aggression. Right? You the whole idea here is you don't hurt someone else. You don't do something to hurt someone else. If you are on the receiving end of that, you have a couple of options, right? You can say, hey, I'm going to run from this conflict. That's definitely an option. One of the things that I do, me and my family, we participate in a Hapkido class. My wife and I are working for our black belts now, actually. But running from a conflict is always an option, and so it's your first option. Uh, second option is to basically find some place to hide. That doesn't always work. Sometimes you can leave a conflict. Sometimes you can let the conflict bypass you. But the third option is to respond and to fight. And the way that I see it the way that I understand it, if someone initiates violence against you, you have the right, and in some cases, I would argue the responsibility to ensure that your response to that is enough so that the threat is ended. And in some cases that may simply mean restraining somebody. In other cases, result in inflicting enough damage on them that they stop trying to hurt you. Um, but basically, as far as I'm concerned, the non-aggression principle applies to how I treat other people. When other people break that non-aggression principle and treat me in a wrong way, they get whatever is needed in order to stop that behavior and to stop them from hurting someone.
All right. And Bird Lawyer wants to know, how are you going to appeal to left libertarian voters when the party seems dominated by right-leaning thought? Sorry, by right-leaning thought.
No, that's interesting. One of the things when I jumped in and started getting involved with the Libertarian Party is it really surprised me. There is a strong left libertarian contingent in the party at this point. We have someone running for chair, Mike Shipley, who's a left libertarian. I've sat down with him and had dinner with him, talked with him. Wonderful guy, and spent some time. Neil Kiernan sent me some links on left libertarianism. Some videos explaining it, and I'll be very honest. I come from a more right perspective. More of a conservative socially, more right leaning in terms of politics. But I think I'm coming to understand the idea of left libertarianism. The Coming from Western Pennsylvania in particular, I have dealt with Amish, I've dealt with Mennonites, I've dealt with Quakers, all individuals that that want to live in a collective society, but also are very much giving the government two middle fingers and telling them to stay out of my business. So that for me, that's kind of my starting point in understanding left libertarianism. Um, I think the main issue here in appealing to the left is to understand their issues, to understand language, and to how they talk and how they communicate, and meet them where they are. I You can't drag people over to your position. You can't force them to come to the same conclusions you do. But what you can do is understand where they are, and go and meet with them and talk with them about the issues that are affecting them, and understand how you can frame the argument for liberty in a way that they can understand. Just as an example, dealing with right, we'll say right leaning Republicans, right leaning independents. Um, their views on, for example, immigration tend to be things like, hey, we should build a wall, we need stronger immigration, we need to put limits on immigration. And when I talk to those individuals, a lot of times I will start talking about my view of immigration, which is that we should return to an Ellis Island model. And that language, talking about reminding them that, hey, immigration is what made this country great. Do you remember the inscription on the Statue of Liberty about giving us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses, right? Yearning to be free. We are a country where we welcome people in because they want to be free and they want to be Americans. That helps break through the barriers on that side in that discussion. On talking to someone with a more liberal view of things, they tend to have a much more positive, more compassionate view of government. They think the government is a good thing, and you talk to them about reducing the size of government, you get a little pushback until you say, well, what about ICE? Do you think maybe we should get rid of the immigration Service. Oh yeah. That would be good. How about ending the wars overseas? Because that's government as well. When we talk about you talk about reducing the size of government, getting them to realize that some of the things that they are fighting against mean reducing the size of government helps bring them show them that, hey, this is just a different view of the same topic, and we're all interested in the same thing. We're all interested in increasing liberty and helping our fellow man, building our communities. We just have slightly different ways of coming at it and slightly different concerns. The real problem is government, and the real solution is liberty.
So of course, like the root of libertarian is liberty. I've heard a lot of people describe what liberty is differently. How would you define liberty?
That is a tough one. Um, Liberty is the freedom to be wrong, and that's something that I think people struggle with because they want to succeed. They want things to be good. They want everything to work out. Again, going back to my experience as a startup developer, right? Sometimes things don't work. Sometimes companies fail. Sometimes plans fail, or your product just doesn't meet the needs that you thought were out there, and it falls flat. Liberty is the ability, the freedom to make choices, whether they are considered good choices or you consider them bad choices. It's the freedom to fail, to learn from your experiences. A lot of what we have in terms of government interference and regulation is trying to make people make different choices. And sometimes, I mean, it even though there may be a wide range of what we would look at and say, yeah, that's a good choice. The government says, yeah, that those all may be good choices, but here's the two that you are allowed to make. That limits us. That keeps us from exploring. That keeps us from trying new things. Um, Ultimately, right? There's a saying in the military. I don't know if you may have encountered it, right? If you try something stupid and it works, then it wasn't stupid, right? So we need the freedom means the ability to try something stupid and see if it works. That's where we get invention. That's where we get innovation. That's where we get success and growth, when people try things, and also when they fail, because every failure is something that people can learn from. Not just the people that fail, but people around them. You think of uh, Thomas Edison was supposedly tried hundreds of filaments before he got to the one that he needed for his light, to make a light bulb work. And someone asked him, what have you done, and have you succeeded? And he said, well, no, but I found 400 ways to fail. Right? He's marked out some territory, and that's avenues that people now know don't work. That's things that they can avoid. Failure actually increases our knowledge. Failure increases our ability to succeed. So giving people freedom, giving people liberty, giving them the right to make whatever decision they want, even if they fail, is important to everything that we are as Americans.
All right. So I understand this next question is a little bit controversial, and if you don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, that's fine. But Don wants to know, what kind of beer do you like?
Oh man, that is. Ooh. I could I could be in danger here. I actually work with a guy who does a craft beer podcast. He's like he and his buddy are like the number 3 craft beer podcast in the United States. So I've been introduced to a number of fashionable adult beverages. I would have to say at this point, uh, it's a tough decision, but I'm going to go with Dragon's Milk.
Oh,
With
Dragon's Milk. I've had that. That's
uh,
a stout, right?
Yeah, I think it's a bourbon barrel aged stout or something. But I've tried it and it's smooth and creamy, and it just has those chocolate overtones, I think, and it's really yummy. Um, it's the sort of thing that I tasted it and I'm like, I could see doing like using this in a roast to throw a bottle in with a uh, pork roast and just see how that turns out. So
Mhm.
it was really it's I'd say that's where I'm going with that one. How about you? What's your favorites?
Um, yeah, this question is where you decide whether or not a person's a man, and I don't know. Most people would say I'm not, because my favorite one is it's a mouthful, just the name. I think it's Michelob Ultra Golden Organic Light Beer. I think that's the name. Uh,
Organic light. Okay,
I'm not an organic guy. It's just that, I
that's
tried
it.
this on a whim,
Yeah,
and, tastes great. It's it's just a pretty good generic light beer, but tastes great. No hangover, no nothing. Like there's
yeah,
just no downside, which is, that's, I don't know. I sometimes, if I'm a fan of crafts and whatnot, but I get a bit of a headache if I have a few of them. So,
yeah, yeah. No, hey, I mean, a lot of cases, you just go with what you like. And I mean, what
mhm,
you like is not what I like. And thank goodness that we've got, 70, what is it, 70,000 different microbreweries, it seems like, popping
mhm.
up everywhere and giving everybody lots of choices.
Yeah, a very wise man I once knew. I spotted him drinking Natty Light, which, as everyone knows, is god awful. And I asked him, like, why are you drinking that shit? Like, that is so horrible. And he said, well, beer is an acquired taste. Why not acquire a cheap taste?
Wise man.
All right. So our next question here comes from Esoterical. Esoterical wants to know, what is your opinion on TERFs? Are you familiar with this term?
Trans exclusionary radical feminists, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Much of an opinion. It's one of those things that I guess you could also ask me, hey, what's your opinion on, this Canadian Hockey League guy? Where I'd be like, I don't know. I don't follow Canadian hockey. I'm not part of that group. Same sort of thing with talking about turfs. I'm not really uh, integrated into that community. I do know the term. I do understand the idea behind it too. Um, that hey, if you are a feminist, um, and you see honest, and let's be honest here, you see someone who used to be a man, who grew up as a man, developed as a man, now identifies as a woman, and perhaps is even going through some sort of hormone treatments or treatments for gender surgery. Um, even though you're in that case, you've got someone who probably does not did not grow up as a woman, does not understand some of the things that feminists are dealing with or talking with or understand their experiences. So I can understand why some feminists would say, hey, you know what, I don't want to include these people. But that for me, honestly, that's an argument that they're having. um, it's something that they're going to work out one way or another. And you're either going to see a split in the feminist movement, or you're going to see some sort of accommodation that comes up. And really, that's up to them. That's the people who identify as feminists, the people who are dealing with this issue. That's their issue to deal with. It's not mine to tell them, hey, you should behave this way or you should behave that way.
All right. And you mentioned hockey there. American Legend wants to know if you're a Penguins fan. He also wants me to say "Go Flyers," whatever that means.
Oh, okay. Nah, you throw down the glove. Yes, I am a Penguins fan. Um, Mostly because my girls, seem to think that hockey's cool. I've watched it a couple of times, and I have trouble following the puck and figuring out who's punching who and whatnot. Um, I am a Steelers fan. Absolutely, we've got a couple of terrible towels. When we watch the Steelers, basically everything stops in the house, and sometimes I'll go upstairs and just listen to my wife and her screams and cheers tell me how the team's doing. Um, and I guess technically I'm also a Pirates fan, just because they are in Pittsburgh, but they're the Pirates. I wish they would do a lot better. So.
All right, and Anon wants to know what you think about Free Staters gathering 50 plus people in violation of the New Hampshire governor's orders.
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, there is a very strong history in the United States of basically standing up for your rights and doing something that the government says you shouldn't do, and the term for that is civil disobedience, right? That's what happened when back way back in the days when someone with the wrong skin color, according to the government, would go and sit someplace where they shouldn't, basically it's saying, hey, you know what? I telling the government I'm going to do what I want to do. And I realize there's going to be or could be some repercussions from this, but it's worth it to make a statement. In this case, you've got these free staters doing that. They're gathering. They're basically telling the government, hey, you can tell us what to do, but we are going to resist you. Is it a good idea? I don't know. I'll be honest with you. It's something that I would question doing, simply because, okay, given the situation right now, I definitely would not want to do something that would potentially, spread or expose someone to the coronavirus that might be hurt by it. There's a reason why. Personally, I go to a veteran center locally every week. I lead a Bible study there. A lot of those guys are on medication. A lot of them have complicating medical histories. And as soon as coronavirus popped up, we canceled that because I did not want to be responsible for taking that virus to a bunch of vulnerable people. But if you do it right, you could get 50 people in a parking lot, put them all 6 feet apart, right? There's your gathering, there's your assembly. You have both said to the government, hey, we want to protest this rule. We're going to do it peacefully, and you've also made sure that you are being reasonable about avoiding contamination and taking care of that. That's something I think I would support.
Okay.
There's no. Basically, what they're saying is, your rule is silly. Here, let's show you.
All right, and Trench wants to ask Sam, why do you have two first names and no last names?
I'm very proud to have two first names. When I was in college, a friend of mine, pointed out that I was the man with two first names, and that kind of stuck. And the other thing is, you notice I tend to go by Sam Robb all together. That's because when your name is Sam, you never get a nickname. Yeah, it's your nickname Sam. That's what it is. So again, a friend of mine in college, Ron Redmond. If you're listening, Ron, hey, Ron was the first one to refer to me as Sam Robb, is because the man with two first names, so he just kind of jammed it together, and that stuck. So I'm very proud to have two first names.
All right. And Scavenger Burke wants to know, if you had to replace the hedgehog with another animal mascot, what would it be?
Honey badger.
Badger? Why badger?
Absolutely the honey badger, because the honey badger doesn't care about anything. If you've ever watched the videos of those things, they just don't give, they just don't care. They are going to do what they want, go where they want, and I think they would be fantastic replacement for the hedgehog. I do love the hedgehog though. I do love the porcupine.
Right. Let's see. Next question here. I am sure every person running for the Libertarian nomination is annoyed with questions like this, but Andrew Robertson asks, if it comes down to Biden versus Trump, who would you pick and why?
Oh man, Biden versus Trump is there's a reason why libertarians include none of the above. Sometimes I don't like that, right? I think, oh hey, come on, you've got, at least vote, at least give your voice. Saying none of the above is kind of a cop out. But this is the sort of case where I wish I could vote for none of the above. Man, it would be tough. It really would. I think that I would probably, and this is, understand, this is not based off of political positions at all, right? Not saying, oh wow, I love Trump's position or I love Biden's position, but I think I would probably lean towards Trump in that situation. If I had no choice, if you put me in the voting booth and said pull the trigger, pull the lever, or we'll pull the trigger, I think I would vote for Trump, just
Why
because
Trump?
it would give us a continuation of leadership in this time right now. I think that's important. Not so much in terms of him as a leader, but in terms of the administration as a whole. No point, if you rolled in a new presidency, you would see new appointments, you'd see changes in positions. I think that would be disruptive. And the other thing is, I honestly don't believe that Biden is going to be the president, given his age, given his medical situation. I'm fairly sure that what you would actually be voting for would be his vice president, and that he would be. I'm fairly sure that he would be replaced at some point during his term. So, and that's a wild card. You don't, not knowing who his VP is at this point, I would definitely not vote for that, because there are some absolutely horrible choices he could make along those lines.
Mhm. So, most libertarians I've talked to who say that they are going to actually vote for Trump, there's always a sigh as they explain it. It's like, they're holding their nose and jumping in the cold water. One of the most common things, or at least one of the most convincing things I've heard libertarians say about why they're going to vote for Trump, is that they like his Supreme Court nominees, like Gorsuch.
Yeah.
How do you feel Trump has done with the Supreme Court? I think it was Gorsuch and Kavanaugh.
I don't know. Seriously, they are about, are not extreme leftists. They are uh, closer to constitutional originalists than you would have gotten from any Democrat president. But I still think they fall very short. Um, I would like to see on the Supreme Court. I would like to see members who really understand that the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, and the additional amendments of to the Constitution are all there to place limits on the government, not on the people. I would like someone who is a strict originalist, someone who reads the Constitution and says, when it says "shall not be infringed," it means "shall not be infringed." Someone who looks at it and says, "No, this is not a living document. This is not something that is going to change in interpretation over time. When it was written, that the people who wrote it had a certain intent, and this is what they meant." If we can get back to that, then I think a lot of what we see in terms of large government starts to crumble. You start to see that, okay, under strict interpretation, the government does not have the right to do this, does not have the ability to do this. And you would see I think you would see a lot of changes coming to our government system through the Supreme Court and through some of the challenges that get up there if you had stronger, more originalist judges on the bench.
All right, and a lot of times when presidential candidates talk about the Supreme Court, they're talking about nominating people to the Supreme Court in order to try to get something overturned, whether it's overturn Roe v. Wade or overturn Citizens United. There's something that they want to see undone. Is there, like, if you had to pick one thing, one Supreme Court decision you want to see overturned, what would it be?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember. It was back was it Filburn back during World War II?
Wicker v. Filburn, yeah.
Is that the grain case? The guy growing grain on his own property?
Yep.
That's
Wicker v. Filburn.
Hey, I remembered it even through the anesthetic fog. That I think that is one of the most horrible decisions that the Supreme Court ever made. I would love to see that one overturned, because that was the camel's nose under the tent for the government regulating everything, right? If you say, hey, you are growing something on your own property, and I believe the case was he was growing feed for his pigs, right? If you're doing that, then you are impacting interstate commerce, because you could potentially have been buying that feed from someone else. Once you go down that route, excuse me, everything goes out the window, because you can say any action that you take potentially impacts interstate commerce, and now the government gets to regulate it. That is one of the most egregious power grabs that I think the federal government has ever made, and that is absolutely something that should be overturned.
All right, there's another really interesting case that stemmed from that. I may be getting this slightly wrong, but as I recall, Wicker v. Filburn was cited as the basis for the decision. I think there was a 60-plus-year-old, I think they were self-described hippie couple in Washington State who were growing marijuana completely legal under the state law, and basically the federal government, of course, said you can't grow marijuana, and they used the same argument for that basis, that, well, if you weren't growing that, you'd be seeking something else on the interstate market. It's really weird to see that kind of stuff go that way.
No, that sort of understanding, that sort of language. That's why we need strict interpretation, originalists on the court to say interstate commerce means interstate commerce. It does not mean something that could be interstate commerce, right? Because everything could be interstate commerce. It means the actual activity. If you follow that same sort of logic, every one of us should be on trial and arrested for murder, because we could be thinking about it, right? That's the idea here. You could be thinking about murdering somebody, therefore we should be able to prosecute you. You could possibly buy something across state lines instead of growing something in your garden. Therefore, we could prosecute you. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's an excuse, the example you gave. It's an excuse for the government to pick and choose who they prosecute, and that is absolutely that's heinous, right? That leads to a situation where you're not dealing with the rule of law. You don't even if you know the law, you can't be guaranteed that if you follow it that you won't be prosecuted, because the decision isn't based on the law. The decision is based on, hey, is someone going to enforce this or not? And 99.9% of the time they don't. Nobody's ever come and arrested me for growing my own tomatoes, right? When they want to hurt you, they basically haul it out and dust it off and say, "Hey, we've got this big bludgeon we can beat you over the head with." And that, like I said, that's ridiculous. That's not the rule of law. That's the rule of men. That's the decision of men saying, "Hey, we're going to use this to enforce this at this time."
Hmm. The next question we've got here. By the way, I really appreciate that answer. It's not something you hear a lot, and I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I can be a little weird that way sometimes. There's you spend some time thinking about things, reading about things, and you realize, sometimes what you see and what you think is the problem isn't really the problem. It goes back a long ways, and there's some roots you need to get to in order to rip things out.
Mhm. So our next question comes from Jordan Phillips. He asks, is there still an importance to government-ran police and military, or do you think it's possible to achieve private sector alternatives?
Wow. Well, police and military, two different things. One, as far as the military goes, um, I think as a confederation of states, right? That's what the Constitution talks about, is that we are a confederation of, at this point, of 50 states that have come together, that agree to be part of this country. Um, as far as military goes, I think the United States should have a defensive military. Um, I think it should be big and beefy and capable of handling anything that gets thrown at us. As I mentioned before, talking about the non-aggression principle, I think our military should be strong enough, capable enough that if somebody decides that they want to hurt us or hurt our country, that we can do whatever it is that we need in order to make sure that that threat is neutralized. Um, so I have no problem uh, with the federal government maintaining a capable military, that is able to deal with external threats. When you talk about police forces, in a lot of cases, um, police forces are privatized. Well, I shouldn't say privatized, but they are pushed down and they are managed at the local level. I know, for example, our police force here where I live, is, I think it's 5 or 6 guys, and they are hired uh, by the township, and basically we as citizens fund that, right, through taxes. Um, on the other hand, I've got a fire department literally just across the hill from us. Thankfully, because we had a house fire at one point. Um, but they are privately funded, and there are a lot of privately funded fire companies in the country. Um, every year they send out they do a fundraiser, and for years we sent them, hey, here's a little bit to help you out. And then we had a house fire and they came and helped us out. And now now we make sure we give them a little bit more. Um, but I think that's a possibility for the police as well. And here's why. Here's why. When you get back to a situation where you are starting to curtail government, when you're starting to pull back on these laws that criminalize behavior, or criminalize choices that people might make. When you start getting rid of victimless crimes, then police have a whole lot less to deal with. not only do they have a whole lot less to deal with, but instead of searching for things that are crimes, they are responding to requests for help. They move from being that kind of like, hey, we're here, we're keeping an eye on you, we're making sure you're not doing anything wrong, to a model more like this fire department that I mentioned, where they're there and they are there to respond when you need help. And that that's a very different model. That goes from law enforcement, right? The idea that police are law enforcement. We're here to make sure that the laws are followed, to turning police into peace officers. Hey, we're here to help. We're here to help you keep the peace when you need to. When it's an emergency, when you have a fire, you call the fire department. When it's an emergency, you have a problem with someone trying to hurt you, you call the police department. That sort of thing can be, I think, could be very easily funded by a community, because when you don't have someone spent who has to spend all their time checking up to make sure that everybody's doing what they're doing, they do have the opportunity to respond when needed, and you don't need quite as many people, and you don't need the infrastructure that you have in some places. So I think it's entirely possible that the police could move to, local police can move to a self-funded model.
All right. And so I've heard a little bit about this that seems to be making its waves. Gentleman Scholar wants to know, how do you feel about the Earn It Act and more broadly the digital landscape?
Oh, Earn It. You're talking to a computer guy. Earn It is probably what, the fourth or fifth incarnation of this type of. I read your server rules, and I hope I'm not breaking anything by saying this is a steaming pile of crap. Um, they have been trying. The government has been trying, various agencies and various uh, organizations have been trying to get the government to outlaw encryption, to put backdoors in encryption, to mandate that encryption be breakable. And this has been going on basically for as far as I can remember, back into the 90s, right? Basically, my entire adult life as a software developer, I've been hearing about this. Um, here's my question for you: would you support the idea that the police are allowed to put a door in your house, and they assure you that they'll keep it locked, that they'll make sure that they are the only ones that have the key. You don't have to worry about that. But you can come in that door anytime and kind of walk around your house and check things out and make sure you're not doing anything wrong, right? That's what Earn It is. The idea that, hey, we should be able to we should be able to just read everything, check everything, and it's an absolute violation of your right to privacy. It's a violation of your constitutional rights to the security of your person and your papers. It's a blatant power grab. It's something that should absolutely be defeated. I've already contacted my representatives and let them know that I am not in favor of it at all. If you go to my Facebook page, Sam Robb, Sam Robb 2020, you can see that I've got a couple of links there that talk about places that you can go in order to file, basically very easily file your complaints with your representatives. The EFF makes that incredibly easy. EFF is a fantastic organization, by the way. Um, Electronic Frontier Foundation, Freedom Foundation. Just I can't express just how much I dislike this sort of legislation, and not just the Earn It Act. There are other bills. I believe there's a bill that's pending right now about restricting gun violence. There have been talks about the Department of Justice requesting, hey, can we just kind of suspend due process for a little bit during the state of this emergency? There are so many very obvious and egregious power grabs going on right now because people are saying, hey, everybody's worried about, everybody's worried about coronavirus now. Let's come up with the the anti coronavirus bill, and then we're going to stuff it full of things that reduce liberties in ways that are completely unrelated to the coronavirus. It's a power grab. It's something that we absolutely need to be aware of. It's something that we need to fight and continue to fight even through this time when we're dealing with this pandemic, and we're dealing with self-isolation, and dealing with medical issues.
All right, so we've got a question from Don. Um, I don't know if you've heard this one brought up much. I mean, I don't know. Libertarian community, you probably have heard every kind of thing. This surprised me when this came up, and then it blew my mind. But it is a hot topic. What are your thoughts on circumcision? Is it mutilation, and should it be illegal?
Oh wow, that's an interesting one. Um, I've got friends who absolutely think that it is that it's mutilation, that it's something that is akin to female genital mutilation, and despise it. I've got folks that just think it's no big deal. It's a medical procedure. It's a hygiene thing, um, and honestly, I have issues with the idea of saying that it is something that is good or bad in terms of law. It is a choice that parents make for their child. Um, it is. I don't believe in most cases that it is a choice made in order to hurt the child. I don't believe that is something that is done intentionally with the intent of causing pain or causing harm. So that's the sort of thing that I'd say, okay, you know what, that is the parent's choice for their child. Um, I don't know how else to put it. It's something that is has become culturally accepted. It's something that is in certain circles is religiously mandated. Um, it's the sort of thing that, okay, if you want to change this, if you want to change the what's going on, in terms of circumcision, um, you need to start changing people's minds about it. You need to start talking to doctors. You need to start talking to people. You need to start talking to parents, and giving them information, and giving them basically explain to them, hey, this is what is going on, because you want them to understand your position. But then after you explain things, they still get to make a choice. So
All right,
it's odd.
which
It's odd to see circumcision coming up as a hot topic.
so, I mean, as I'm hearing it, uh, as far as the government's concerned, your position is it's a parent's choice. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Again, going back to the idea of government, um, are you willing to see someone die for this? Right? Because that's what you're saying whenever you say there ought to be a law. Hey, I'm willing to use force, or have someone, basically not me. I'm going to get someone else to do the dirty work. I'm going to let someone else either strong arm you, browbeat you, throw you in a cage, or shoot you. Um, and if you are not willing to say, yeah, someone should die for doing this, then I'm very hesitant to talk about getting the government involved.
All right. Um, so what about female genital mutilation? Is that something that potentially someone should die for doing?
That to me, that seems like a different sort of situation, because it's intended to. It's not something that's presented as, oh, this is a hygiene issue, or, oh, this is a cultural issue. It is something intended to basically remove any sort of pleasure from someone. Uh, and it's a very basic sort of uh, you wouldn't go in and say, oh yeah, we're going to remove all these child's taste buds. That's just a cultural thing, or we're going to deafen this child. That's just a cultural thing. You're removing something that uh, that is I can't even find the words to express it. It's something that I couldn't even fathom as an adult, making a choice for my child. Hey, I'm going to make sure that they are unable to experience some sort of pleasure. Um, so I hesitate on that one, but that to me seems like an instance where, as a parent, you're not doing something for the benefit of the child. You're doing something to harm them, and I think I would lean towards yes in that case. That's the sort of thing that you'd want to get involved in.
Okay. Uh, Next question. Scarce wants to know if you become president. What is the first thing you do day one?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of things I would do day one. And these are just so you know, these are kind of standard for the libertarian politicians. Um, you're going to hear a lot of the same answers to this if you ask one of the libertarian candidates. And in all honesty, basically what I would be doing if I were president is I would have every one of the other candidates somewhere advising me to make sure I don't miss any of these issues. Um, first off, any federal prisoners any federal prisoners that are in jail for nonviolent crimes, pardon them. Um, if I can issue a pardon, I will. Right? If you are in jail because, for example, that the couple you mentioned, because you were growing marijuana in Washington, it was perfectly legal, and we just the government put you in jail because the Interstate Commerce Clause, yada yada yada. No, I'm going to go ahead and I will spend the whole day signing pardons if I need to. Um, the second thing I would do would be to go to Congress and say, hey, I've got this authorization for use of military force. I've decided not to use military force, and I'm going to start bringing the troops home. So I would give them a deadline, say, hey, I'm starting to plan this. This is going to happen. This is the day it's going to happen. If you want to have a war, that is your responsibility. I'm not going to carry out any wage these military operations overseas without a declaration from Congress and authorization from Congress. Throw the ball back in their court, and I'd start doing the planning to bring the troops home. Um, third thing I would do would be hit the Department of Education, and basically, if as much as I could, I would fire everybody. I hate the Department of Education. We were something like the top 10 for education when the Department of Education was put in place. We're now horrible. Um, and I think a lot of that stems from government control. Fire everybody in the Department of Education, and if I can't just give the money back to the government and tell them that I'm not spending it, I would instead of spending it on bureaucrats and government Department of Education, I'd just make block grants to the states and let them figure out where they need to put their money, because they know better than we do what needs to happen. Um, and for people complaining about, oh, that's still just government. No, I'm giving back the people in the states the money that they sent to the government. Right. I'm just trying to return to the rightful owners. Um, let's see what else. Oh, there's so many things. Uh, sit down with the basically with the IRS and say off just off the top of starting off the top. Hey, we've got these special IRS courts that are authorized to adjudicate issues, and I'm going to fire all you guys and say that anybody that pays 10% of their taxes is good with me. And here we go, de facto flat tax, because the Congress can tell us this is how taxes go, and I get to, because I'm the executive and I get to direct the IRS courts. I can tell them, yeah, you can accept this flat tax payment for everything. So that's how we're going to do business now. Thank you, Congress, for giving me the executive power to do that. Um, and so on and so forth. There's a couple of other things I'm sure I'm missing, but those are probably the big ones for me.
All right. Do you think what you're suggesting there with the tax policy is constitutional?
What Congress has the power to levy taxes. That's in the Constitution. We've got the personal. They've got the ability to levy a personal income tax. It's also in the Constitution. It's a lot of cases we have seen that what Congress says as a law and what gets enforced is very different. We have, for example, we have seen recently Congress saying, "Hey, this is the law about this is what the laws are in immigration," and various states saying, "Oh no, we're going to allow sanctuary cities where we're not going to enforce these laws." And the federal government in the presence, basically in the capacity of the president saying, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." We've seen the same sort of thing. Actually, you brought up marijuana, right? Marijuana is still criminalized at the federal level. It may be legal in states, but it's still considered a federal can be considered a federal felony. So you have the case where, in certain instances, the uh, the executive, the president, has told federal law enforcement, "Hey, we're not going to enforce this law," and Congress has basically been silent about it. So in this case, if the Congress says, "Hey, yeah, here's the laws, here's what the laws are and regulations are in marijuana," and the executive can say, "Yeah, we're not going to enforce that," I have no problem with them saying, "Hey, this is what the laws are for going out and taking people's money," and the executive saying, "Yeah, we're not going to enforce that." They're going to have if they have a problem with it, they're going to have to deal with it and say, "Hey, you don't." If they say you don't have the power, I'll say, "Yeah, yeah, I do. You've given it to me. You de facto, you've deferred to the president and the executive in terms of enforcement of these things over and over and over again. I'm simply following the pattern set by previous presidents. If you want to change it, you need to make a law. You need to enforce it. You need to give me clear guidance and clear direction, because otherwise, I'm going to use every bit of leeway that I have to increase freedom and decrease government regulation and decrease the burden of government on people in the country."
So, Barry wants to know, what do you think of your fellow libertarian candidates?
Love them. They're fantastic. Uh, Actually, we did a Massachusetts debate, and Chris, who was the chair of Massachusetts Libertarian Party, I think, mentioned that we're like iron sharpening iron, which is a biblical reference. Basically, we are all working with each other, but we're also growing and sharpening each other and helping each other to hone arguments and to build a better argument and and basically refine our messages, right? Um, each and every one of these candidates is fantastic. I like them personally. When I first jumped into the ring and started getting involved, I got a welcome message from Kim Ruff, who's no longer running, which is actually horrible, because I think she and John Phillips were a terrific team, and even as a candidate, I would have welcomed them. They would have been awesome. But Kim sent me a welcome message. Adam Kokesh, on my birthday, he sent me a message and wished me a happy birthday. I've gone back and forth with Dan Berman on taxation is theft, and whether taxation really is theft and stuff. It's been a warm welcome from all the candidates. It's been a tremendous pleasure to work with all of them and get to know all of them. Personally, they're all fantastic people. Um, Politically, we have some differences, which is good. right? If we all had this the exact same message, then we basically we'd just be nobody'd pay attention to us. We all have different ideas. We all have different. Uh, let's put it this way: we all want to get to the same destination, and some of us are willing to go off road and hike over hills. Some of us would rather avoid drive around and take the long way and the scenic route. Some of us would rather pack up a tour bus with a bunch of people and make a bunch of little stops on the way. We all have different ideas of how to get to this destination, this place where the country is free, where everybody in the country has more liberty. What we're doing is arguing about what path we're going to take, and not only that, but which path would appeal most to the people that we want to bring along on the journey, which would be the disaffected Republicans, the disaffected Democrats, the independents that are looking at whether they, which variety of venereal disease they want to vote for this year. That's where we are, right? And the really wonderful thing is, if I get the nomination, I know I'm going to have a dozen people backing me up. If somebody else gets the nomination, I know I'm going to be one of the dozen people backing them up. We are all focused on the same destination. We are arguing over how we're going to get there, and once we decide once the party comes together and decides, hey, we think this is the person we want as the face of the party, this is the direction we want to go, you got a dozen people that are going to say, fantastic, let's hop on that bus, let's go in that direction.
All right. And let's see. So our next question here, Breezy wants to know, how would you tackle income inequality?
Wow. One of the things that I would do is obviously as libertarian, is get the government out of things, right? Stop taking people's money is the first thing. You can eliminate taxes on I think it's 50% of people paying taxes. Anybody paying taxes less than $50,000 a year. You can eliminate taxes on 95% of small businesses, and that total hit there is about $250 million. So in other words, if you can trim $250 million off of our, what is it, 4 trillion plus budget, then you can get to the point where half of the country and 95% of the small businesses in the country don't have to worry about interacting with the IRS ever, which is fantastic. So that puts a lot of money back in people's pockets. When you get rid of barriers like that, you start making income mobility a much bigger possibility. Just as an example, if you want to better yourself, you say, hey, I'm working at Kroger's, or I'm working this minimum wage job, and I want to do something better. I want to be a barber. I want to be a hairdresser. And you go to do that, and the first thing you ask is, do you have your license? Do you have your certification? Have you taken the required 3 years of training and passed 1,000 hours of internship or whatever that you need in order to cut someone's hair safely, right? That is those things are impediments that the government has put in place in a lot of cases to prevent competition. That's something that was put in place because the existing hairdressers and barbers said, we don't want anybody competing with us. We want to maintain our position as the only suppliers of this product. So let's make a law that makes it difficult for people to do it. Every one of those licensing laws, every one of those times when you have to go to the government to beg for permission to do something that you know how to do, is an instance where if you get rid of that, then you make it possible for people to do things, to start new businesses, to engage in new opportunities, and to better themselves and better their economic situation. And overall, it would be fantastic, I think, to see a situation where everybody has the opportunity, even if they don't take it, but everybody has the opportunity to say, you know what, I want to do something different with my life and go out and do it without having to make sure that it's okay with some bureaucrat in Washington.
All right, and this just blew my mind on the last question here. Speaking of the other libertarian candidates, you are having a debate tonight with one of them. Is that right?
Not tonight. I've got a debate with let me check my calendar here real quick. Because I think I've got Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be talking with Adam Kokesh. I think later on this week, I'll probably be talking to Adam Vora. Still trying to get that set up. But this evening, I'm going to be on the Roads to Liberty podcast with, I believe, Nathan Porada. So we're going to be talking about my campaign and talking specifically, I believe he wants to talk about my pro-life position, my position as a pro-life libertarian. And I believe also after that, he's got like a double header. I think he has a after me, he's going to have an hour where he's specifically talking to a doctor about COVID-19 and government's response to that. So if you have the opportunity and you've got some time, you may want to tune in and listen to that.
All right. So there was another question here. Something particular on one of the other candidates. What are your thoughts on Vermin Supreme?
Vermin is Vermin is awesome. He is a fine guy. Like I said, personally, all the candidates are really wonderful. One of the interesting things is that it sometimes is hard to find a place where you can catch someone that's not in campaign mode, not in debate mode, and is just being themselves. And when I know that for me sometimes that can be an issue too. You're geared up. You're like, okay, I'm in debate mode. I'm answering questions. I've got 1 minute to answer everything, right? So everything's kind of clipped and everything's kind of hurried. Catching Vermin when he is relaxed, when he is himself, he's just an amazing guy. Obviously, like all the other candidates, we don't agree on some things. But we don't agree on things civilly, and I think that's the important part with a lot of the Libertarian Party. He'd rather talk to me and convince me that his position is the way I should go, and I'd rather talk to him and convince him that no, we need to do things this way. We've had some back and forth. Just recently, challenged furry supporters on Twitter to see which of us has the most furry supporters, and of course, as usual, I'm getting creamed because Vermin is like the internet powerhouse. He's the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to internet presence. But it's one of those things that someone's like, why would you do something like that? I'm like, well, now there's like 1,500 Vermin followers that know who I am and know I'm a good guy and I know I'm a good sport. So I see that as a win, not just for me, but for the party as a whole, for everybody to see that we've got candidates that can go back and forth, can joke with one another, that we can be, even though we disagree, that we can be civil and we can be friends. That is a picture and a message that is absolutely 100%, 180 degrees opposed to what you see in the Democratic debates, that you see in the Republican, when they had Republican debates. We are working together. We are not in opposition. We are striving to find the best candidate and the best message, and because we all are pulling in the same direction. We're not after this for power, which is why you see all the other debates. You see people backstabbing each other and going for the throat and whatnot. We are after finding the message that we need in order for all of us to work together. So, and Vermin definitely falls in that category. If I'll be honest, if Vermin is the nominee, I will be out there explaining to people that, yeah, you know what, the boot is not what you need to listen to. You need to listen to his message. So,
all right. Let's see. Last questions here. We only got another 10 minutes left here, but
okay.
let's see. Brexiteer wants to know, what do you get out of running for as a candidate?
Oh wow. Let's see. I get abuse. I get denigration. No, seriously. I have in all my materials, I have a little folder on my computer named hate, and I throw some of the really good uh, comments directed at me in there. Um, it's interesting. What I get out of it is experience, obviously. Um, I'm serious about running. I realize it's a long shot, but I am conducting a serious campaign, and if I am elected, if I'm nominated as the Libertarian candidate, I will go full tilt and do my best to campaign and to win the hearts and minds of the American people, and to convince them that the Libertarian Party is where they need to put their vote, um, with the goal of making it into the White House. Uh, Along the way, I am gaining experience. I am learning a lot about the ins and outs of the Libertarian Party. I am making friends and across the party and across the country, people that I know and trust and have come to love, and absolutely will campaign for and support in the coming years as they have their own campaigns and races that they engage in locally and at the state level. Um, I'm a voice in the party for. We haven't really talked about it, but I'm a voice in the party for pro-life libertarians. There's a very good argument, I think, for libertarians being pro-life that is not based on religion, but is based on the understanding of the non-aggression principle, which appeals across the board, both to obviously to religious individuals who have a belief that life begins at conception, and it also appeals to atheists and non-believers who think that children should be protected even in the womb. So it's nice. I think it's good for the party to have a pro-life voice up there. I think it's good for the party to have a very vocal Christian running. I am I'm a preacher. I've mentioned that. There are certain things certain stances that I have as a libertarian that a lot of people would be surprised by, because I'm coming from a stance where, okay, you're a Christian, you're a preacher, you're a former Republican, so you must want the government to throw people in jail for using marijuana. No, actually, I'm not just pro legalization. I'm pro decriminalization. Um, I think you should treat marijuana like you treat tomatoes. If you're growing it in your backyard, you should be able to use it yourself. If you you should be able to buy it at the farm market when you go down there, and it should be, the only regulation should be, is it clean and is it safe? Um, people have asked me, yeah, okay, you're a religious guy. What's your stance on sex work? And as I've said several times, I don't, it comes down to, when you say there ought to be a law, are you willing for somebody to die? And I'm not willing to say that someone should die because they're engaging in mutual exchange of services between adults for money. I don't believe that someone should die if they are a same-sex couple that wants to get married or wants to adopt children. I don't believe that someone should be thrown in jail or die or killed if they identify as other than their birth gender. There's a whole host of things that I think, as a Christian libertarian, I can throw some light on and say, hey, you know what? My friends, friends out there, my conservative friends, my religious friends, I would like you to think about things in these terms. You know, once you start thinking like that, you realize that, you know what? If I want to change something along these lines, it needs to be a social change. It can't be a government change. It's a heart and soul change, and we've kind of gotten away from that, and we can return to that. So I think there's a couple of things I get out of running like this. I think we have a chance to increase the party. I think we have a chance to put up a really great president, and I think we have a chance to reach out to several communities, in the United States, and uh, let them know that libertarianism is not something that's alien to where they are or what their experiences are.
Mm-hmm. So next question I really like here. Sam wants to know, what are your thoughts on Gary Johnson? And I would just add, should they bake the cake?
Should they have baked the cake?
Mm-hmm.
Should they have baked the cake? No. Um, Libertarian position. If some, nobody owes you labor. Again, are you willing to see someone die for it? No. If you're not saying this is something that's significant, then it's a choice. Hey, find another baker. Um, and if you remove the government licensing, then possibly you have a lot more choices to in your community as to who you can go to and ask to bake a cake, because you don't actually have to beg the government for permission to help someone in their wedding. Gary Johnson, I like Gary Johnson. One of the things that I did when I started prepping my campaign was research on him and how he ran his campaign. I've talked to a bunch of people that have been Gary Johnson staffers. I kind of wish that he was more active in the party. Uh, One of the things that I see in the current crop of candidates that I really like is a lot of commitment to, hey, where are you going to be in 2 years? Is this something you're here and you're doing this, and you fail to get the nomination and you're just going to fade away? And that seems to be the history of candidates. I know that's something that I'm not going to do. I know that's something that a lot of the other candidates are not going to do. We are here. We're committed. We're going to stay active, uh, regardless of what happens. And I would love to see Gary Johnson kind of step back into the ring. Maybe not as a presidential candidate, but as a leader within the Libertarian Party, as someone who is willing to help work to grow the party, to help other people as they campaign, and he's got a wealth of experience and knowledge that we could really use.
All right, so we're about at time. You think we can squeeze in one more?
Ed, go for it.
All right, so I skipped over this because I thought this was a troll question before, but from what you said, it sounds like it's actually not. It sounds like someone actually knows who you are here. So this is like on a level that, all right, I did some research on you before, having you on. This is something that was pretty in depth. I had no clue about. So they want to know, why is it that you have such a following among the furry community?
um, I really I can't explain that. I am from Twitter, or I'm from Pittsburgh, and I mentioned that on Twitter. And Pittsburgh is the city that hosts Anthrocon every year, which is the big furry convention. And I honestly, the last couple of years, I've really enjoyed going down and walking around during the convention, and seeing the people in costume, and it's really kind of cool seeing all the detail that people put into it. My oldest daughter is into cosplay, so I kind of understand the dedication that goes into making some of these fursuits and whatnot. And I really appreciate uh, and that if you're listening and you're a furry, and I want you to understand, I mean this in the most positive sense. I love the way they just let their freak flag fly, right? They are who they are, and they're going to do it, and they're not, they don't care what anybody else thinks. That's actually really cool to me. But I think I may have mentioned that on Twitter at one point, and somebody picked it up, and I got one of my volunteers is a furry, and actually seems to, from what I see, it seems to be fairly popular in the community. So I think that was the inroads, and obviously it, when you've got a bunch of people that are willing to do, hey, this is who I am, I don't care what you think, I think that tends to have, be a breeding ground for libertarian thought. So you've got a lot of, we've had a lot of interesting conversations with some of the furry folks on my account and on my Twitter, and I've got someone talking to, hopefully, whatever happens with this campaign, possibly talking about maybe doing a panel at Anthrocon if they'll have me, and just it's fascinating to me. It's one of those things that's just like I said, it's a bunch of people just doing what they want. Not a care in the world. They're not hurting anybody, and it's really kind of cool. I like it.
All right. So I really appreciate you coming on. I think it's been fantastic. If you had great answers here. Not just saying that. I really think these have been pretty insightful and well thought out.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your service. I know Kokesh hates it when we say that, but thanks for your service.
It's no, I kind of understand where he's come from. I a little bit different, but yeah, I served. I did what I did. It's no big deal. But thank you, and thank you for your service, and thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it, and the questions were awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, and if you're available, we do have that round table this Friday, unless I'm maybe. Yeah, I think it's this Friday, right? 7.
I think so. Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to do that. I'll see if I can make it.
Awesome. Would love to have you on for that. So thanks again, and good luck with the event. I'm sorry, I know you mentioned this. Who are you talking to in like 20 minutes here?
Roads to Liberty.
Roads to Liberty. Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to send me a link to that, I'll post that so people can jump in on that.
I'll do that. I'll send that to you by Twitter. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, man. Thank you, guys.